Good morning, Kota territory. Welcome to the Kota Now desk, where we're having our first ever Between the Lines book club. I have been looking forward to this since we came up with this idea. I'm really excited. And Chloe is here. Obviously, I'm Mimi Herrick. I'm really excited. This is going to be laid back. I have this computer here so I can monitor your comments. So if you have some thoughts about this book and you want to share, go ahead and just let us know. Comment your thoughts, what you want to talk about. But we'll kind of just start loosely with some notes that I made for us here, and then we'll just like hop right into it after that. So let's start off with, how did you feel about the book generally? So we read Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. For those who didn't read it, click away because there will be spoilers. But what did you think overall?
I actually was very surprised by this book. I'm a little kind of pessimistic usually when I go into reading new things, mostly because I don't like to be let down by books. But this really kind of went above and beyond my expectations. There was a really elegant style to the writing that I really enjoyed. A lot of the world building, a lot of different plot points were ideas that I haven't really seen before.
Yeah.
And if I have seen them before, they were done in a totally different way.
Yeah, I think one of the things for me that made this book particularly good was it took tropes, like there was that chosen one sort of thing going on there, and it took something like that and it made it into something very different, right? So I think one of the good things with that was like the tropes that were there were so unique that I had never seen before done like that. I also really enjoyed the writing style. I'd say overall for me it was like probably, I would say like a 4.5-star read, really solid. I think the only issue I had with the book was it felt very much like a lot of exposition, which obviously it has to be. It's the first in this series of books. Yes. So, you know, good overall. And you mentioned the writing style. That is something that I wanted to talk about. How did you feel about sort of the writing style of this book?
I think that you probably could have said the same thing in fewer words.
Oh, totally.
Or in a more concise way. But it was I enjoyed it. Yeah. And it was that kind of writing where it feels a little magical, just because the language chosen, the sentence structure, how things are described helped immerse you into that world. So yeah, it could have been more concise, but it was nice. It was part of the experience.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. I think that the writing style really added to sort of the sort of dark fantasy vibes of this book, because it starts out like immediately you're thrown into this world where things are seemingly not going very well for our main character. Literally the first line, I have it here because I said it opened up with a bang is my note, but the first paragraph is, "No child truly believes they will be hanged. Even on the gallows platform with the rope scratching at their wrists and the shadow of the noose upon their face, they know that someone will step forward, a mother, a father, returned from some long absence, a king dispensing justice, someone. Few children have lived long enough to understand the world into which they were born. Perhaps few adults have either, but they at least have learned some bitter lessons." And just opening a book with that is crazy. I remember I saw that and I was like, what is going on here? I have genuinely no, I was like, what is this about? Obviously you read the back and it's like, magic is happening here and there's something going on with the nunnery and all that, but you don't really get the full extent of the world in fewer words than that. I think that really set up the sort of premise of where we were starting, right?
I definitely agree. That opening really had me hooked, and just the way we start that story in terms of the initial knowledge we're given as a reader is enough to make us interested, but also enough to kind of leave us wondering and guessing of, how do we even get here? Yeah,
exactly. I think it opened it up with the perfect amount of information, but also a lack thereof, because it does sort of draw you into this, deeper story there. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the magic. I thought the magic in this was extremely unique. You brought this up to me when we were texting about what we wanted to talk about here, but it just was, I don't know, I've just never seen something like that before.
Definitely. It's something that took me by surprise, because a lot of times when you look at books, you go, okay, it has magic. You kind of know what you're in for, and you know, oh, well, this is going to happen, or this is how the character is going to discover their abilities. And I felt like this book sort of broke the mold on all of that. the way the discovery was done, both with the character and then as the reader, the way our character learns to embrace those powers and use them, and also just the way they're described in terms of both visualization and actual use, were all completely different for me. And I don't know if you've read anything similar, but I certainly haven't.
I
so
haven't.
It was really cool.
I haven't seen a lot like that. It was such an intricate system too that also played on, you know, it had aspects of religion. Obviously, there is the whole religion aspect. I mean, they are like Nona is in the nunnery being trained to become a Red Sister, right? And the magic, the way that they have it, where it plays into religion and race as well, I thought was really interesting. You know, like certain races of these people have different, you know, sort of abilities. I thought that was interesting. And that kind of leads me into the next one that I wanted to talk about. So in this book, there is a prophecy and a chosen one. And I kind of talked about it a little already, but I did want to get into that as, you know, we start to talk a little deeper into the story, because it starts out where you're like, why are we following this character, right? And then you get to the nunnery and there's another character introduced, Arabella, and she is the chosen one, right? But we're following Nona, so I thought that was a really interesting twist to it.
Yeah, the chosen one is so common in most fantasy books. It's kind of like, you have to have one.
That is the fantasy trope.
Yeah, and so I wasn't surprised when we got introduced to a chosen one, or the concept of there being a prophecy and someone has to be chosen. I was a little taken aback of like, oh, it's not our main character here. And that was refreshing. Yeah. Because that's kind of part of the journey, right? Someone who's not the chosen one, but still doing all of these things, who still plays a very important role in the whole prophecy and the plot, getting to see it from their perspective, and then also seeing that dynamic and balance between our main character, who are getting that internal dialogue, we're getting those emotions, and then the actual chosen one.
Yeah, I thought that was also really interesting that, you know, in this book, Nona is the shield, right? She's this prophesized shield who's going to be like sort of defending and fighting alongside the chosen one, right? I thought it was really interesting how they kind of made Era and Nona not like each other. Like, I thought that was a really great way to sort of address their differences, and sort of like how when it is thrust upon you, it's like, well, I don't want to be the chosen one, and I don't want to work with her. Why should she get to also be the chosen one? Like, I thought that was interesting. And especially how their relationship sort of evolved after that as well, because one of the things that happens in that first sort of section of the book, because we do jump around in time a little bit, right? So we start with like, you know, Nona at, I think she's 8 in the very beginning of that, or 9 maybe, 8?
Thereabouts, yeah.
8-ish. So she's really, really young, and she has to go through the shield trial when people are challenging, you know, Abbess Glass's decision to save Nona from the gallows. And I thought that the shield trial was a very sort of pivotal character moment for Nona as well.
Yes, one thing I thought that was interesting for us as a reader is we're like finally really introduced to what Nona's magic is and what her capabilities are. But we also get little hints that Nona's been well acquainted with this for quite some time now. Even though she's still very young, it's revealed to us, okay, she knows what she's doing, she knows how to handle it, she knows how to utilize that magic and exactly what she needs to do in those kind of situations, which is really telling for us. It gives us a lot of hints towards her backstory of, okay, what really is going on here? Who is she really?
Yes.
But then it also shows just how quick she is in terms of learning, picking things up, figuring things out on her own. So in terms of character development, I think that point in the plot is really crucial.
Yeah, I did really also like how it was sort of this like, I'm gonna sacrifice myself sort of selfless moment, because that is such a huge part of Nona's character and why I really liked her. And because she was defending her friend, right? There are moments in this story where I think the like theme of sisterhood between these girls is so strong, and it really speaks to how like when you are put in these situations, maybe in a group of women, how there can be these relationships that are really powerful and interesting. And I thought that that was really well done in this book, like the relationships between characters, the friendship, and especially between Nona, like kind of fighting herself on who to trust and who to not trust. And she doesn't know who she should tell things to and who she shouldn't. And I thought that that was a really interesting way to sort of exemplify who she is as a person with that first trial. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was, you know, sort of after the Shield trial, we skip ahead, right? We skip from when she's, you know, a novice to then she is a Grey Sister, I believe is what they call that next level. So you kind of skip some time. So you go from her being like 8 to now she's 10 or 11, I believe, maybe a little older, between 10 and 12 would be my guess there based on how they acted. And they get up to some sort of like hijinks, which I think is really interesting. I don't know, I really liked that part because it showed the development of these characters kind of going through this school-esque environment together.
Yeah, I really liked having the sort of time jump. It wasn't large enough that I was like, who is this person? What's going on? But it was enough to feel like you had been with Nona for a while, and felt like, okay, well, I know who she is, you know, as a character, and I know what she's about. And being able to see the way that the characters amongst all the girls, like you said, their friendships, their little rivalries going back and forth, and sometimes also just being kids, you know, having that dichotomy between these serious situations, people fighting for their lives, and then also reminding us, hey, these are children.
Yeah.
They're still going to play around and have jokes and goof off. And it was really, I guess, human to see that difference.
Yeah, I think that was something that Mark Lawrence did really well throughout this book, was really humanize and like make you understand the reality of these characters being so young. Because when we're first there, you're in Nona's head a little bit, right? Like you're getting her thoughts on things, and the way she thinks of certain stuff is very childish. Like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble. People have always yelled at me for this. I'm never going to do it again. And then, you know, it just like stuff like that, where she has these thoughts that are very like reminiscent of what a young child would think if they were put in a situation like this. I mean, obviously, children are not going to a magical nunnery and like having to go through all these trials and tribulations to save each other. But, you know, it is interesting to see that and their alliances. Another thing I wanted to talk about, I forget what it was called, but that towards the end of the book when they're out in the wilderness, sort of kind of fighting for themselves and, you know, really getting into experimenting and actually using their power to the full extent. What did you think at the end of that betrayal?
It sounds terrible, but I was pleased. Not that our main character got betrayed, but I was happy that there was that kind of added twist. The book would have been good without it, but it was that extra something. And it wasn't necessarily fully unexpected, right?
Yeah.
There's foreshadowing, there's hints, there's all that good stuff. But it still had emotional weight, which a good betrayal needs to have emotional weight.
Or else it's like, why are we even bothering with being betrayed? I agree with you. I think that it was a really good way to sort of emotionally bring this all to the surface of really the tensions between these girls and their rivalries and what's important to them and blah, blah, blah. And it was really clear, I guess, at the end, like, how people felt about the convent as a whole and like being involved in this, and like some of them just wanted to learn how to use the power, which is obviously what caused the end betrayal. And another thing I thought was really interesting at the end is after we get this whole betrayal and this big climactic fight scene, we immediately cut to way in the future when we know that we're with Sister Cage and Sister Thorn, and they are fighting the person who betrayed them. And I just thought that was very, very interesting how that flashed forward. I want to know what he's going to do with that sort of setup going into the next book. Like, are we going to get the immediate aftermath of these Grey sisters kind of working their way up? Or are we going to be taking that time jump again to once they're fully like an initiated member of this like convent?
Yeah, I am actually going to read the rest of the series. which I'm a person, if I don't like a book, I'm not going to finish it.
Yeah.
If I don't like a book enough, I'm not going to read the next one. So for me, this was good enough to motivate me to read the rest of the series. And I am really excited to kind of figure out, okay, where do we go from there? Because going to that epilogue, like you said, that was kind of a little bit of a shock.
It was,
to the
yeah, it was
reader.
a shocking.
It was good.
Yeah.
But I had a moment where I was like, wait, I got to reread that line real quick to make sure.
Yeah, well, because it's such a huge thing in that first sort of part of the book when they're choosing their names, because all of these nuns will choose their name to be an object, right? So they'll get rid of their regular name, and Era and Nona go together and they choose their names together. So Nona chooses Cage because of the whole thing in the beginning where she is being carted around in this cage, and Arabella chooses Thorn, which I thought was an interesting choice, and I think that really gives you some insight, even though we're not in her head, but kind of where she was at with everything.
Yeah.
So I did think that was really interesting. Before we wrap up here, though, is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I really appreciated how this story could fit so many different age groups and audiences. We're talking about a main character who, when we're first introduced, is like 8 or 9. And then even by the time we're done with the story, she's not much older. But we were still able to really enjoy that story, and it still felt like a very mature story. It would be appropriate for someone probably a bit younger than us, but also appealing to someone older than us as well. And I think that takes a level of mastery on the author's part to be able to write a book that the person doesn't have to be the character's age or anything. They don't have to necessarily be in that same position, but still be able to immerse themselves in the story. And then I also really just liked how, despite us kind of being in one location, right, the nunnery for the vast majority of the book, it still felt like a complete world.
Yeah.
I was given enough backstory, enough information. All the other characters were fleshed out really, really well, so that I didn't feel like I was missing the rest of the map, essentially.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that about this book and books in general, when even though you're in one specific situation or place, you can really feel the politics of the world, like being a major factor in the events that are happening in the book. I think, you know, personally, I'm a huge Brandon Sanderson person, and I think he does that really well. When I first read Mistborn, that whole religious structure had a huge impact on the story. And I think that Mark Lawrence did something similar with the religious and magical structure in this, in making it all sort of be one central, like, political sort of intrigue of the world.
I would definitely agree.
Yeah, and so I guess before we wrap up here, my one last thing that I want to say is we have actually already picked our June book. So if you are looking for something to read in June, and you want to join us again for one of these, we are reading Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. And if you want to find some more information on that, you can check out our Instagram page. There's a graphic posted there with a little bit of some summary, the awards that it's been nominated for, the Goodreads link is also there. So if just head to our Instagram page, we'll have that there. We will be meeting, I believe, Wednesday, June 25th, so the last Wednesday of the month. We will be meeting, and we hope to see you there. Thank you so much for joining us here on Between the Lines.